Peter R. Breggin, MD, is called the conscience of psychiatry for his many decades of successful reform efforts. His scientific and educational work provide the foundation for modern criticism of drugs and ECT and lead the way in promoting more caring and effective therapies. His books include Talking Back to Prozac, Toxic Psychiatry, Medication Madness, Psychiatric Drug Withdrawal, and now, Guilt, Shame, and Anxiety, Understanding and Overcoming Negative Emotions. Welcome to the Dr. Peter Breggin Hour.
Hello, my wonderful audience. I have what I think is a breathtaking show for you today. I recently had on Michael Cornwall, and he's back today. Michael, are you connected?
Yes, Peter, I'm here.
Oh, well, thank goodness for that. And we're here to talk about something that we believe is absolutely terrifying. We began the conversation last week, a few weeks ago on the air, and it has to do with the passing of electrical currents through the brains of children for the cure of what? ADHD. This idea of using electric current to the brain goes back to, shocking people with, those snake-like creatures out of the sea. It goes back to centuries in various forms. Somehow, some shock to the brain that doesn't kill you or knock you out might be really good for you. It's got a great history with electroshock treatment. Approval of this device called the Monarch comes from the FDA's division on devices. And this evil division is the one that recently gave approval, after all of the evidence against it and all the complaints against it, the approval to use ECT in depression in treatment-resistant patients without ever defining treatment-resistant. This unresponsive to humanity or science division has now given us this Monarch device. And what does the Monarch device do? It puts enough current through your brain to at least give some of these kids headaches. It stays on all night long, mostly on boys. The goal was to keep it on for a year or more. And the FDA, that great division over there, that of devices, the FDA tested it for 4 weeks. 4 weeks. And it allowed one study of patients, about 30 or so active kids getting it, 8 to 12 years old. One study. Not even a duplication attempt. You wouldn't get away with that in the drug division unless you had some very special pull or special concept to use. And when the company itself went ahead and tried to test it for 12 months, first of all, half of these maybe 36 patients, half of them didn't want to go on after 4 or 5 weeks. So 18 remained, and 3 of them finished after 12 months. It was an utter failure over the year, which is the company's intention to use it for years, of course. And that this got FDA approved is a crime. And we're going to talk about different aspects of this. But let me take a breath and talk about what does it mean for kids? What does it mean for the boys? And mostly boys, of course. What does it mean when doctors are going to prescribe this for boys? What does it mean when parents are going to hook them up and supposedly somehow monitor them through the night? What does it mean to think about our boys this way? We are in such a destructive phase right now toward boys. This looks like one more takeout punch. And remember, there's nothing specific about this for ADHD. This is the same thing as being given to veterans for PTSD, not through the FDA yet. Depression, anxiety, this is a winner take all treatment. We're going to do it to everybody, but we get it approved for the kids because the FDA device people are unscrupulous, and the shock company, it's a form of shock, are unscrupulous. This is a terrible situation. I hardly know where to begin, and I'm looking forward in a few minutes to Michael Cornwall rescuing me with some broader perspectives. Let me take that breath and tell you you're watching PRN.FM, and it is the Dr. Peter Breggin Hour. And you can follow my work on frequent alerts, and you can follow the whole stuff we're doing on frequent alerts because we are going after these people. You have a dedicated line to get in touch with me at breggin@hotmail.com. We have a great breaking news feature where there's information on this on breaking news too. And you can call us, and we want callers today to sort of pitch in on this issue. Please call. Give us a break. This is hard stuff to deal with and face. Give us a break. Call in. Give us your opinions. 888-874-4888. 888-874-4888. Now, working with my wife, Ginger, and with Michael Cornwall, who is a psychotherapist, a PhD, I put up on our website, Breggin.com, a banner for the Children's Resource Center. Just page down about 3 banners, and you will come to our banner, and you'll find on it our new organization. I put a lot of thought into what to call it, and I finally came up with something simple. Stop the Psychiatric Abuse of Children. SPAC, S-P-A-C, SPAC, with a exclamation point. I like it. SPAC. Stop the Psychiatric Abuse of Children. And we ask you to join SPAC. You can do it by joining our parent organization, which is the 501c3 empathictherapy.org. You can even find a way to contact us directly and talk on the phone with Michael Cornwall. We're going to see how that works out. No, I'm sorry. Oh, my God, poor Michael. I mean to email Michael. And we got a great title for the email, SPAC Victory, S-P-A-C, SPAC Victory at Outlook.com. That's how you talk to the director. Michael is going to be taking more and more of this over. And he was the original one to draw attention to this. Now, there is so much nonsense surrounding all this. Basically, it's the old lobotomy stuff. You put electrodes on the brain of kids, and you put through a few amps of electricity, but you do it for hours. Hours. And there's no attempt made, no neuropsychological testing, no attempt to see what the effect is on the brain. None. It's bizarre. It's an electrical assault. And I'll be looking into and telling you more and more about the amount of electricity that's being used and other things like that. And if you go to the website and go to the banner about children, and you'll end up at a big page, Dr. Breggin's Children Resources Center, SPAC, Stop the Psychiatric Abuse of Children. Join us. Help us out. I feel like we really, really have to do something about this. And remember that all these children have normal brains until that damn electrodes are put on their heads. By definition, ADHD is a normal brain because if they actually find something wrong with your brain, it becomes a neurological disorder, like a brain injury. It's just a bunch of symptoms of things that annoy teachers and frustrate parents, talking out of turn, talking back, not paying attention, not being good at details, and just to catch some of the girls daydreaming. That's just nothing. That's either normal or, sure, some kids are real upset and they can't focus and do their work, but it's not ADHD because there's no such thing. There's no disease. It's anxiety or upset. Most common cause probably is being the youngest kid in the class. You haven't reached maturity, or you're not reading well. You're embarrassed. You don't tell the teacher. Teacher doesn't like you. How many of you out there have had teachers that didn't like you and you didn't like them and it got all messed up? You know, that's one of the things that contributes to kids not paying attention in class and so on and so forth. And you'll also get, if you go to the website, you'll get Michael's blog that blew the whistle on all this. You'll get my blog. You'll get the FDA's touting of how wonderful it is. We're putting together information. We're not sure exactly where we're going, but we're just hoping folks are going to join us, maybe set up your own local organizations. I'm not sure. Let's start talking about it. But let's stop the psychiatric abuse of children, and let's stop it with this newfangled, awful thing, this Monarch that gets applied to the kids' brains and passes current through for a whole night. They're doing it every day of the week. They did it to some kids for 12 months, except they all dropped out but 3. All right, I'm going to take a breath. Call us at 888-874-4888. And Michael, come rescue me with some wisdom and thoughtfulness.
Well, Peter, first I want to thank you and Ginger and your organization for taking on this latest psychiatric abuse. And this one, for me too, when I saw that news about the FDA approval of this device being put on kids' heads all night, it just was so troubling because, as you and I know, children who get diagnosed with ADHD or bipolar or all these diagnoses that kids have been getting, up 30-40% incidence of these so-called disorders being diagnosed, they all have causes, or there are reasons why children struggle, why they're afraid, why they're sad, why they can't focus. And as someone who worked for 28 years in a public mental health system, in the last 15 full-time as a therapist with kids and adolescents, the good news is that all these issues that would cause a child to get diagnosed with ADHD and given drugs, and now this new electricity, all those kind of issues around their emotional life. At school, where I worked, it was a public mental health system where most kids in this country get their mental health care through Medicaid, through the Affordable Care Act and other programs. So, there are millions of children now, I think 6 million diagnosed with ADHD in the United States. And the good news is that someone like me who never once gave a child that diagnosis, I never wrote it down. Because I don't see people through that psychiatric disease model. The good news is that children can be helped with what's troubling them, that gets them identified as, acting out at school or having academic problems. So I always did family therapy, individual therapy, parent groups, and all that. And I never once, Peter, in 28 years, referred a child to a psychiatrist for medication. Never. I never will.
And you're working with tough kids and families.
Very tough kids and families where, we did actually, I put together a study of all the hundreds of kids in our mental health system with all the therapists there on the effects of trauma and the incidence of trauma in kids' lives who, most of these urban settings are very, very rough places to grow up and survive. And the overwhelming majority of our children had been exposed to trauma, victims of trauma. My good friend John Reed, who's the leading researcher now in the world on childhood trauma, he has these scales on adverse childhood experiences where we can actually measure what's going on in children's lives. So instead of looking like what's wrong with you, what's wrong with your brain, the question is, what are you struggling with? What's happened to you? What do you need that you're not getting? As you've talked about in your work with children, the parents being able to set consistent, firm, fair limits, and also giving that unconditional love. Well, that's hard to do, when you're a single mom and you're struggling out there, living, with bars on the windows and the door because there's gunfire every night in the neighborhood. Those are the kinds of families I worked with for the 28 years. So when they came in, it was like, let's provide them the support that can tip the scales, not these medications that stigmatize and pathologize. So the good news is children can respond and can get help. But this Monarch device, Peter, let me just briefly say what I saw starting in 1980. Out of the hundreds of kids in our public mental health system, maybe a handful, 5 or 6, were on any medications. By the time I left in I think 2008, 99% of the kids were on medication, and not just one medication, because this is how it happened. At first, the children would start getting diagnosed with ADHD and started on Ritalin or Adderall, usually because they were having problems at schools. Again, all the chaos at school and the neighborhood, being bullied, threatened, all that stuff. They're afraid, angry. So they get diagnosed by a child psychiatrist in the clinic with ADHD and started on the stimulants. Well, that's not going to solve the problem, right? So when that didn't solve the problem, then the child was, you also have depression. So for that, then they were added on Prozac, which, as we know, disinhibits adults and really disinhibits a lot of kids. Then, in addition to the depression diagnosis, was sometimes OCD, but often then oppositional defiant disorder, and then finally, after a couple of years, bipolar. So you'd see all these children starting out with the ADHD diagnosis, and now most of the kids in foster care, and at any given point, there's about 700,000 kids in foster care. Most of them have a mental health diagnosis and are on a whole cocktail of meds. So I would see these children, they'd be referred to me for therapy. I would never refer them to the psychiatrist, but, kind of in desperation, these psychiatrists refer to me, and they would have them on, Peter. If you were 7 or 8 years old, you'd be on 4 or 5 meds and would have like 3 or 4 different diagnoses, right? So you and I know what's going to happen when this Monarch device comes online, right? That's going to be added on too. All the meds we're doing isn't solving the problem. The kid is still struggling, still acting out. Let's put this on their head. I know that's going to happen, and it's going to happen mostly to kids in foster care who get the brunt of all this. And I actually believe too, and I'm not being overly dramatic, that when kids are on these inpatient psychiatric units, it's going to take a couple years for this to ramp up. When they're in group homes and inpatient psychiatric units, foster care, I believe the next expanded application of this, Peter, is going to be PRN. It's going to be, Johnny, you need a timeout. You're acting up. Go to your room. We're going to put the TENS device on your head, and it's 2:00 in the afternoon. Do you think that's going to happen? I believe it is. So the whole scenario to me is nightmarish, and I'm really grateful that you and Ginger and your organization is, putting together this Stop Psychiatric Abuse of Children. And so I hope people, will go to your website. There's a vast amount of information on Peter's website, friends, all kinds of videos, articles, things that Peter's done more than anyone else over the years on this. It's available there, and the best resource we have is information, is the truth. And I trust Peter Breggin with my life. He tells the truth. Dear. So when you go there, it's not conjecture. Let me just quickly say too, the fact that the word abuse, stop a psychiatric abuse, as mandated reporters, Peter and I are required by law to report suspected child abuse. Working for the county, I saw it all the time. I've done dozens and dozens of those reports, tragically. and trying to get the families the help they need. So to use the word abuse, I think it's time for us to not equivocate, not be hesitant, but actually say what's happening to children are human rights abuses. When children are given drugs, they have no agency, they have no say in the matter, they're totally at the mercy of these prescribers. And the parents who love their children, it's the only game in town. They go in, they're pressured by people at schools, you got to get your kids on meds, we're going to put them in a special ed class, you got to get your kids on meds or you're bad parents. Peter even has an article, you got to get your kids on meds or we're going to report you to Child Protective Services. So there's going to be incredible pressure, but it's an abuse. I believe it's a human rights abuse, what's being done to children by psychiatry. And I think it's time we just come out and name it. There's sometimes a really freeingness when we name something for what it is, and you did that, Peter. It's abuse. So I'll stop there and turn it back to you.
Well, I agree with, everything that you're talking about. I had an experience, folks, where Ginger and I took on a huge task, and we won. And I'm hoping this was what we can do now with Michael. But we won with the help of multiple organizations who listened to us. And this is when I found out, that Ginger found out, actually, and then we joined together on this one. Ginger found out that the federal government was planning a racist eugenic program in the 1990s to go into the inner cities to study little children in the inner city, code for black, not even Hispanic, pretty much code for black, and study them from the womb on, study the parents, very invasive, study them genetically, find out what was genetically wrong with little black children, that they all got, that so many of them got violent. I mean, this is the kind of BS, the kind of violence that can come out of the federal government. And Ginger and I shut that thing down. We wrote a book called The War Against Children of Color. And of course, the weapons going to be used against these children of color are going to be the same weapons used against all the kids, especially they were thinking about Prozac way back then. Start giving it prophylactically to potentially violent children. I mean, it's awful. We stopped that. And I nearly stopped. I mean, there's a little bit of it going on. All of the lobotomy that was coming back, surgical mutilation of the brain, that was in the 70s. Well, I thought, I'm 83 now, May 11th. I was 83. I thought, I'm not doing big projects like that anymore. I'm going to write. I'm going to share with people. I'm going to give my wisdom and my knowledge and try to give direction and especially do positive things. And then when I heard from Michael about this Monarch nonsense, I decided that a lot more was going to have to be done by me on this subject. I just could not sit by. I see all these children, young people, being taught that they are machines subject to machine adjustment, that their brains are going to, quote, be modulated. That's the word they use. Modulate your brain waves. That's a crap. That is nonsense. That is evil. I mean, we have no idea what disrupting these normal brain waves, which is what these children have. You hook them up to an EEG, and these kids have normal brain waves. Don't forget that. Hook them up to an EEG, electroencephalogram. They have normal brain waves. They're not modulating anything. They're disrupting. They're disrupting the brains of these children and their electrical function, which means their nerve function. They lie. They say they're aiming at the trigeminal nerve, but I mean, that's ridiculous. That's one of the many nerves that come out of the base area of the brain. They're putting this thing on the frontal lobes, and as some of the researchers admit, it's just going right to the frontal orbital cortex, which is right where Walter Freeman swished around his ice picks. They're always going after the frontal lobes. And the best they'll be able to do is make kids more docile. And if it works, these kids get calmed down. Remember, if it works, it's harming them. It works by slowing them down, by making them more apathetic, by giving them headaches. All the psychiatric treatments basically disrupt function and do some leveling. And this is just a new kind of leveling by disrupting the overall normal patterns of the EEG, of the brain waves. God knows what that is going to do to children over weeks and months and years. But it ain't good. You can be absolutely certain. It's a frontal electrical mini lobotomy. That's what it is. And to see this possibly unleashed on children, it'll be followed probably by a resurgence of electroshock for children and a resurgence of lobotomy for children. It's an entering wedge. And remember as well, that, you may have been sitting there thinking, well, Michael is talking as if, this thing's only been approved for ADHD, but he's talking as if all these children are going to get it. Well, Michael Cornwall's totally right, because all you have to do is get something approved for anything by the FDA, and then a doctor can use it in any way they want. That's the law. The law is that the FDA cannot control what doctors use treatments for. They can only approve a treatment and get it on the market for a specific disorder. ADHD is not a disorder. It's a collection of behaviors that, bother teachers who can't control their classes in most cases, and otherwise come from these other terrible things that need to be fixed, bad nutrition, beatings, whatever. But this can be used on everybody because the entering wedge has been made. All they had to do, without even 2 studies like you need for a drug, 1 study, not with hundreds of patients, but that's about 36, 35 kids, and the rest are controls. And so damaging that only half of them want to go beyond 5 weeks, 4 weeks, and then there was an open week where they got it outside the controlled trial. And then that hardly anybody could finish or wanted to finish. And believe me, they're not going to tell us why. And they're not going to do neuropsychological testing to follow what the damage is. The FDA doesn't demand it, and they won't do it. So this is a terrible, terrible situation that we are facing. And remember, if you'd like to get involved with this, and most of my callers, they call me the last Wednesday of the month, which is going to be coming up soon, and because that's the open day. But today I'm inviting you to call 888-874-4888. I know, not used to interrupting the exciting ongoing shows, but today that'd be a good thing. I want to hear some outrage. I want to hear some ideas. I want to be, joined in, and I think Michael does too, into the start of our new organization, SPAC. SPAC. Stop. That's it. Stop the Psychiatric Abuse of Children. Focus is going to start on this particular Monarch disaster. And you can call. I keep saying call. You can email Michael at SPACvictory, SPAC victory @outlook.com. Michael, save me again from myself here and lead us on.
Well, I hope people can call in today too and join us. And just to remind people a little bit more, in the I would say almost brazen FDA press release about this, it looked like somebody wrote this for some kind of Madison Avenue branding firm or something. It was the FDA, and it said, the electrical current goes to areas in the brain associated with ADHD, as if they knew where in the hell that was, right? But and then it goes on to say side effects are drowsiness, sleep disturbance, poor appetite, headache, and fatigue, and the children report unpleasant tingling sensation on their brain. I mean, on their forehead, the thing stuck on there with a little cell phone device pushing the electricity in. And then the kicker for me, too, was results were not realized for a month. So that means, the parent kind of dutifully, in good faith, the doctor says, you need to do this every night, putting this on the kid's head for a month before they even saw any results. And again, we'll post more stuff about this study.
And that's the end of the study at 4 weeks.
That's the end of the study.
So they don't know if it's maintained.
Right.
Their little bit of good help, which is going to be blunting the kids. But go ahead, Michael. I apologize.
Well, just imagine a child, a 7-year-old child, that's the youngest they used it on, being told, you've got something wrong with your brain. And that's how it happens. One of my clients recently veered over to one of the health services organizations and saw a child psychiatrist, before they got to me, with their little 6-year-old child. And the psychiatrist saw the kid for 10 minutes, reached in a drawer and pulled out a plastic model of a child's brain, and the little boy's eyes got big on the floor. And he said, right here on this is a model of your brain. Right here on your brain is where, you have the ADHD problem, but the medication I'm going to give you today will fix that. So this insult to the children's kind of sense of themselves, you wrote about that, Peter. I really love that, let's not forget what it means to a child to be told you have something wrong with your brain. You're young, you're 6, 7 years old, and said, well, I just want to go out and play with my friends. No, there's something wrong with you, with your brain. And so then, I mean, you're an MD too. I mean, you talked about the normal EEG. What about kids? I mean, no wonder the kids are drowsy and have sleep disturbance. If this thing is on a child's forehead all night, tingling and sending this stuff into their frontal lobes, I mean, we all know now about the incredible importance of sleep, right, Peter? I mean, can you imagine what this is doing to that 90-minute sleep cycle that we go through over and over during the night? So I just think it's a horror, and it's going to be the most vulnerable kids who get this done to them. So I'll just stop there.
Yeah, and I started to talk about a little earlier, the work I did in the past stopping things, and I was thinking of just telling a story, which I lost track of. And the story was that I, in the process of shutting down this entire program and cutting off all kinds of federal funding to projects, I was invited to address the combined researchers of like 4 or 5 different agencies in the federal government, from some of the children's agencies to NIH and NIMH. And I'm sitting up there with 100 or so people wrapped around tables. And one of these guys raised his hand very indignantly, one of these researchers, and said, "You're talking about child abuse." It shows you, Michael, how far back this goes, just labeling it like this for me, although I never named an organization on the basis of it. And he said, "How dare you accuse parents of child abuse?" And I looked at him, I said, "I haven't accused a single parent of child abuse. I'm accusing all of you in this room of child abuse. You're the ones behind all this, along with the companies manufacturing the drugs," which was mainly going on, it's what we were talking about. So, you professionals, you're the abusers. You could stop this. You could say, stop drugging all of our kids. I don't often get invited back to speak again to most of these organizations I talk to at the universities and in the government. But so I'm talking to my friends here, my wonderful audience. If you know anybody with any influence, let them know about this. Send them to Breggin.com to the banner on children's issues, and they see SPAC right on that. The headline is Stimulants, ADHD Drugs, and Electrical Assault. Get in touch with Michael Cornwall, who you've been listening to at SPAC Victory at Outlook.com. follow what we're doing. If you want to make a small contribution, join the Center for the Study of Empathic Therapy. You can go there directly, Center for the Study of Empathic Therapy.org. It's got stuff on the front page about this program, but most of it's back on Breggin.com. And you can join there and tax deduct your contribution, most likely. It's a 501c3. Let's really get going. I have not done a major project in years. I decided it was not fitting for somebody my age to get disengaged again. And I'm telling you that this is so outrageous. And Michael's predictions are going to come true. They're going to come true. And we're just going to see so many children on this. So let's get it established right now that there's an alternative viewpoint. And let's see if we can embarrass the government. Any of you know congressmen, senators. We need an outright assault on this with all the imagination of everyone listening here, everyone who's going to listen to me on bigger radio and TV stations than my wonderful radio audience, too. So let's all get involved in it. Michael, you were telling me that when you told some of the people you know that I had named the organization Stop the Psychiatric Abuse of Children, SPAC, they really liked that.
They really did. I think it's that's the kind of language whose time has come more broadly. I just love the scene of you back how many decades ago there telling all them, the researchers and the pharma people, you're doing abuse, but let's risk doing that. I'm asking the listeners. I'm not suggesting you go in and pound your fist and call these mental health professionals or people at schools who are insisting your kid be treated this way, calling them names. But I think we can truthfully and honestly call this abuse. And so when I sent this out to my big Facebook network and my website and everything, a whole bunch of people got back to me and said, "Okay, I'm in. This is what it is. It's psychiatric abuse." And then for so many people, Peter, too, the responses were, "And let me tell you what happened to me." And a lot of them, we're talking about what happened to them when they were children and teens, or just all of the abuse that goes on in the psychiatric system, of course, is not limited to children. As you've been fighting for all these decades too, every person who is forced to take these drugs, whether they're 3 or 83, every person on this planet now is at risk of being abused by the psychiatric disease model. You've written stuff around the elders in long-term care and nursing home. So many of them are being given antipsychotics, for God's sake, right? So the abuse is real. It's abuse, and a lot of people have felt like the worst thing, hopefully as human beings, the worst thing is bad stuff being done to our children and grandchildren. Well, let's name it. It's abuse, and people are up in arms that I've been hearing from, Peter.
Well, good. I think one of the big selling points for this machine, they're pricing it pretty low, $1,000. That's very little for a device. And I think the big selling point they're going to do with the federal government, Medicare, Medicaid, insurance companies, private insurance companies, is, heck, you could spend that much a month several times over on all the drugs that we give our kids. They literally... A lot of them would be spending more than $1,000 a month on drugs. Some drugs cost $1,000 a month. So they're going to be pushing this as cheap, cheap as electricity, cheap. And I think it's got the potential to be just a terrible thing today. Oh, I just saw a note that I'm so involved in this. I just looked up at my notes from coming in from the studio. I apologize to Jesse and Alec, our friends at the studio. The phones aren't working correctly. We won't be able to take calls today. They just moved. Do we still have a guest on hold? No, that's Michael. That's Michael, the guest. So we don't have any calls today. I'll tell you, folks, you can see this is discombobulated me. I love Michael's kind of groundedness as he talks about this stuff. I just think, there's a lot of stuff just going on inside me about the absolute necessity of doing something about this. And I'm glad our listener numbers are higher today, Michael, than usually in the summer. And I'm glad to see that. I think folks are interested in this. I think folks care about this. Michael, what do you think people could do? I wonder, could people begin to set up organizations of their own? We could talk about that. We could discuss, do we sort of give permission to people to call themselves SPAC? Stop the Psychiatric Abuse of Children. I don't think we're there yet, knowing just how we're going to go about this. But that's one of the things I would love to see. And you don't have to focus just on this electronic stuff, But I do think right now that it is just somehow the most gut-wrenching of the abuses, because I can just see this is so easy. I mean, the doc prescribes it, the parents supervise it, you clamp the kid on every night. And by God, if the kid has a typical brain injury effect and becomes a little more docile, a little more passive, parents aren't going to know it's brain injury. They're going to think he's better. And if he focuses better because he has less imagination and the injuries are making him OCD, which is how the stimulants work. Stimulants work by harming the brain so that the kid's imagination and spontaneity is reduced, and kids are made OCD by it, so they look like they're studying. There's no evidence stimulants work. There's no evidence at all beyond a few weeks that they even control behavior. The behaviors that people react against it. It's like drinking alcohol or any other drug to try to subdue yourself. Your brain keeps fighting back and fighting back. That's why Xanax and these other drugs addict. The brain fights back. The brain is not going to sit around and just take this being electrically stimulated. It's not only going to suffer injury from it, it's going to react back. It's going to try to find ways to compensate for the electrical stimulation. We're going to end up, as we do with all the drugs and various head injuries, with not just the injury themselves, but the brain's desperate efforts to try to compensate for the injuries. And it's just going to be a mess. The brain is too wonderful, too marvelous, too complex, too exciting. Whether you think it's evolution or God's handiwork or both, there's nothing like it on the face of the earth. I mean, we're taking a little child's brain, the most amazing thing on earth, a little child's growing brain. That child's going to learn to speak without even trying. It'll be taught to read with more effort because that doesn't come naturally. That child will love and be loved. That child will create things, and no two children are going to be alike, and they're all going to be different. Even if they're twins, they're going to be different. People are going to treat them differently, and they're all remarkable. No one knows any of their potential. They have the ability to grow and change, and we're gonna go into that miracle, that biological, spiritual mystery, the brain, about which we know but shadows, and we're going to spray it with electrical current every night. We really do need to get fired up about this. We really do. Michael, save me again from myself.
Well, I'm right with you there, and I've got tears forming in my eyes listening to you, because it's infuriating, it's frightening, but it's heartbreaking too. The Center for Disease Control just a couple of years ago issued an urgent alert that somehow they've been kind of reviewing all these kind of national medical records, and to their surprise, 10,000 toddlers under the age of 3 had been diagnosed with ADHD and put on stimulant drugs under the age of 3.
Oh, they'll look cute with their little electrodes on them, won't they?
Well, and that's what'll happen. And like I was describing before, because the underlying reasons why any of us are upset are kids, and most of those children who were toddlers who got diagnosed with ADHD was because they were, they weren't sleeping at night, or they were having temper tantrums. Well, the parents need help. The parents need support. But because what's offered is, well, your child has ADHD, they're 3 years old, I think you should just give them these drugs next, and then the psychiatrist sees five people an hour. But what I saw, Peter, and I think I just want to emphasize that again, is it gets added on. Because the ADHD drugs don't address what's really going on, then the next drug and the next diagnosis happens. And what I believe will happen is you'll have kids who, like right now, there's many, many, many kids, and almost all of them in foster care, getting 4 or 5 different meds. Like I said, the Abilify, the antipsychotic drug, the Xanax, the anti-anxiety drug, the Prozac, the antidepressant drug, the Ritalin, the anti-ADHD drug. Almost all the kids are getting something like that. And then they'll say, but we're still having a problem. Let's stick this on their head. I believe this will not just be used for kids who so-called weren't responding to the drugs. I think it will be added on. And as I was getting ready for this program with you, Peter,
and adults too. I mean, everybody's going to get this thing. Go ahead.
And so, but for all the listeners, and again, I've never been critical of parents who tried to do the best for their kids. I mean, I've always come up with alternatives and written about how parents need support. But any of us, imagine when Peter and I are off the radio now, that somehow you at home had 5 pill bottles in front of you: the antipsychotic, the antidepressant, the anti-anxiety, the anti-ADHD drug, and you took each one of those this afternoon and put it in your mouth and swallowed it with a big glass of water, and then you went and laid down and put this thing on your head for an hour. How in the heck do you think you would feel this evening? How in the heck do you think you would feel? Those drugs are powerful. They're powerful. And I dare anyone to take that cocktail that countless children are taking and be able to get up and go to work the next day, to even function. So how about that, Peter? Can you imagine what it would be like to take that drug cocktail that so many kids are taking and then stick the electric thing on your head?
Yeah, and some people, some of my wonderful audience, you may be thinking, well, what are the studies of giving 4 and 5 drugs show? There are no studies. Every single child on more than one drug is an experiment, because the FDA requires you in almost all cases to have everybody off of all their drugs before they test the new drug. So you don't test these drugs on people with other drugs. It's too confusing, confounding, and difficult to interpret. So every one of these kids is a guinea pig. Every one of them is being made more sick. There's no way multiple psychiatric drugs, all of which are neurotoxins, that is, they're all poisonous to brain cells and to many other cells throughout the body. I mean, just read the litany of adverse effects in the full prescribing information, which you can just plug into. If you want to know the full prescribing information for Xanax, just Google it. I mean, you can just say it aloud into your voice, whatever that thing is that I use, and say, Google, give me you say give me, just say full prescribing information for Xanax, or full prescribing information for Klonopin or whatever it is you want, and read it, and you'll know you're talking about a neurotoxin. It's practically impossible to show that any psychiatric drug works on anybody, and certainly on children. We know that ADHD drugs don't work. We've had so many studies. The main thing the studies show is that the drugs make kids worse and stunt their growth. I mean, that's the main thing we know from the stimulant drugs. They can't prove anything else. They're basically being grandfathered in. Adderall XR, 3-week study, even shorter than the 4-week study for this newfangled mini lobotomy electroshock machine. It's just a disaster. And when you add electricity, disrupting brain function to the multiple, infinite numbers of dysfunctions being created by one drug, let alone 2, 3, 4, or 5, you have a mess in the brain. You might as be pouring a hole in the skull of the poor kids and pouring in excrement. It's that bad. And I'm sorry I'm getting so vivid. But this is something that really, really needs to be stopped. Let's draw the line now. Draw the line now. And give us a hand. Read up on our website, Breggin.com. Email Michael Cornwall at SPACvictory@outlook.com. Join the Center for the Study of Empathic Therapy. Let's get to work. This is going to be years. This fight will be going on when I'm not around. I don't plan to go anywhere. I am in great health. I'm in just pretty much perfect health. But, Michael,
me too, Peter. I turned 73, and I thought I might be doing some more fishing. But, it's like the old fire dog. When this bell rang, it was like, okay, I'm on. I got to fight this.
We got to find some younger leadership here, Mike. I turned to you immediately because I trust you so much and because you blew the whistle on this and because we've known each other for years and so on and so forth. But you and I need to talk about that. We need to reach out to some younger people. And folks, we are just beginning. We're just in the first few weeks. We are not going away on this issue. And we hope you don't go away on this issue. Michael, we've probably got 6 or 7 minutes left. Oh, boy.
Well,
what kind of thoughts
I think
do you
what
have?
you were asking earlier about how, and you're saying that how can people get involved, get active? Still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think part of what's great about this is, it's you and me and Ginger at this point. And your listeners, this is something that can start organically from the grassroots up. And it's not like you or I are saying, well, this is what it's going to be. This is what you need to do. No, if people, we'll learn from everybody. We're going to come up with ideas. Let's do this. Let's do that. There's all these natural allies out there already. I mean, God knows you have so many connections around the world, especially around the whole ECT and the electric assault on the brain. It's just going to grow on its own. But I think anybody who just has an idea, hey, well, I'll tell my sister who has her child, maybe going to get one of these things, or when I go to my doctor, I think there's just that momentum that starts when people go, this ain't right, and I need to say something about it. If it's just saying something, if it's just making a comment on Facebook, whatever, it all adds up. It reaches a critical mass. So, at some point, I don't know that we're ever going to get, in our lifetime, this device taken off the market, but it, as you and I talked originally, if one child doesn't get this put on their head, then we did the right thing.
Yeah, I'm with you totally on this issue. The organization against SPAC, SPAC, Stop the Psychiatric Abuse of Children, and the website on Breggin.com, which is about the fourth banner down. It's right below the great big banner on the frequent alerts, which is the best way to stay in touch with me. It's free. and what we're doing and what this organization is going to be doing, just go there and you'll find a link to the articles and publications, so you can be the first to be reading about what's going on here, what the manufacturer's saying, what the FDA is saying, and you can see my blog and Michael's starting blog on all of this. We really need you, folks. I feel like I'm on one of the educational channels saying, please support us. No, I'm saying, please join the fight to stop what could be the most extreme abuse of all of our children in decades. In decades. And so, Michael, you've got the dedicated email now, and hopefully you'll be getting emails from people at SPAC Victory, SPAC Victory at Outlook.com, and you'll be in touch with me about it. And we'll.
Yes, everyone who emails me there at SPACVictory.com, I promise to respond. It may be a day or so before I get back to you, but if you email with suggestions, comments, criticisms, ideas, brainstorming about this is how I really believe things happen when people just are invited and come into creating some kind of critical mass to make change. So if you write to us there, you'll be responded to, I promise you.
Well, some of my friends have started to email in because I've got one of those newfangled machines that flashes up and he's got ideas, wants to get involved. He's one of the leaders in the world in psychiatric reform. So I haven't started calling people yet, folks. You are at the very, very beginning, and I think this is going to take off. Help it take off. You'll be able to look back in a few months or years and say, I participated in stopping that. I can tell you at my stage of life where I'm still doing everything I ever did, but I have a sense of its trajectory. It is one of the great things to look back and say, hey, because I was alive, there's less lobotomies and psychosurgery going on in all of the world, or because Ginger and I are alive, we're alive. There's no eugenical program under the guise of psychiatry and mental health going on in the inner cities of America against little black children and nowadays Hispanics as well, I'm sure. So, get involved in this. Michael Cornwall, bless you. Thank you for being on the air. I hear the music in my ears, sir. Parting words?
Thank you. Bless you. We can do this. We'll do this.
Thank you, my wonderful audience. Thank you for listening. Thank you. And stay in touch with us. Bye-bye now.